Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining today's call. We'll just begin probably in 10-15 seconds, just a few people still joining. All right. Hi, everybody. Hope you're well. Thank you for joining today's webinar we're running together with Microsoft and Haileybury. We know everybody's busy and there are lots of things going on, so we appreciate you taking out the time from your busy day. My name is Sulabh Jain, and in my role here at Antares as the education lead, I work with education institutions all over the world on a daily basis to solve industry problems on the Microsoft platform. Many K-12 education institutions nowadays are looking to leverage data for better, timely, and more transparent decision making. So today we have a unique opportunity to hear from our customer Haileybury on the data journey they've been embarking on, as well as to get an insight on some of the future goals and plans they have. I'd like to introduce you to our presenters today. Muskan Nanchahal from Microsoft is an Azure specialist in the Microsoft education team. In her role, she supports IT and business professionals at education institutions across Australia to empower their organizations to unlock the potential of Microsoft cloud technologies. She's worked across security, cloud infrastructure, data and analytics, and has developed extensive experience helping schools navigate the journey to the cloud. Muskan is passionate about developing and executing new strategies to drive innovative Azure-based solutions across the education sector, which engender trust in security, governance, compliance, quality, and in the responsible use of AI. Meet Faisal Zakaria from Haileybury, who's a chief guest today. Faisal has over 20 years of experience in the ICT industry. He started as a technician and worked his way up into senior roles before moving into consulting and eventually heading up consulting teams. He's worked in a number of industries ranging from K-12, gaming to healthcare sectors in Singapore and Australia. Faisal has a plethora of experience in leading ICT teams, big or small, and currently heads up a growing team of 26 staff at Haileybury. So here's our agenda for today. I'll get started with a short introduction to Antares. You will then hear more from Muskan on Microsoft's vision for enabling intelligent education for Australia in the K-12 sector. We will then have the privilege of hearing from Faisal from Haileybury on the data journey so far and the plans for the future. And at the end, I'd like to share some of more notable work we've been doing with schools in the data and AI space. So I hope you stick around for that. During the presentation, you will be on mute. So if you have any questions at any point, please type them in the chat. We will be taking questions in the end before we close, and we will do our best to answer as many questions in the call today. If we are not able to get to any question today during the call, we'll connect with you individually by the end of the week to make sure your questions are answered. So a very short introduction on Antares for those who haven't worked with us before. Antares has been in the business for over 15 years, working on Microsoft technologies and are strategically aligned with Microsoft. We specialize in building data and AI and modern work solutions and applications for our customers. We've been working in the education sector for over a decade now, and we work with education institutions in K-12, not only in Australia, but also overseas in both developed and emerging markets. Lastly, we have a lot of IP we've built over the past 15 years. Having the tech already sorted helps us focus on the business problem and in providing cost-effective solutions that work for customers. We've made significant investments in developing some of our IP, and I'll be sharing later how the K-12 institutions can leverage some of our IP without any additional costs. I'd also like to provide a little more information on our data and AI capabilities specifically and our 4 key focus areas and our 4 key pillars. Our work in the data strategy leverages our capability-based planning approach to help customers create a roadmap based on their data needs and their maturity level. In data engineering, we leverage our IP and frameworks available to provide our customers with a modern data architecture in a short period of time. We take a design sprint approach to data analytics that helps the customers build the reporting and the analytic solutions based on the business needs. And lastly, we provide customers with data science expertise for those looking to leverage machine learning to solve more complex problems. We offer a range of offerings in this space, right from helping schools take their first step with the data project to helping more advanced customers with data reporting, data integration, and building data warehouses. So if you have any questions about any of our offerings or what I've covered so far, please do not hesitate to ask questions in the chat. But that's enough of me. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Muskan from Microsoft, who will share Microsoft's vision for enabling intelligent education for Australia. Over to you, Muskan.
Thanks, Ulab. Hi, everyone. Today I'm going to be sharing with you all some data and analytics trends that we're seeing across the K-12 education sector, as well as share a little bit of insight into the opportunities that these trends present as well. So during the pandemic, students across the country were affected by school closures, and despite all the challenges, the education sector really stepped up to the task, and almost overnight we had schools completely digitally transformed so that students could keep learning from home. We had platforms like Microsoft Teams, enabling students to connect and collaborate with their teachers and each other remotely, and productivity apps like those in the Office 365 suite, which really meant that our teaching and learning staff could work from wherever they were. This mixture of in-person and online learning sort of became the new normal. And this also accelerated another defining trend across the education sector, which was really about student-centered learning or personalization. And today, hybrid learning really gives students a degree of autonomy that they didn't necessarily have before in just the physical classroom, and it's really setting the stage for the future of personalized learning. In other words, whether students are receiving their instruction in a physical or a digital setting, they will increasingly expect it to be tailored to their abilities and interests, as will their parents as well. So from a K-12 perspective, once upon a time, we would have snapshots every 2 years of how students are performing through NAPLAN results in years 3, 5, 7, and 9. And parents would be presented with a snapshot of how their child is performing academically or from an extracurricular activity standpoint once a term or once every 6 months through report cards. What the trend to hybrid learning has presented to us is this enormous data opportunity. Today, dozens of learning apps are used in schools, such as Mathletics, that can provide that near real-time insight into how students are tracking in terms of learning outcomes. Of course, in addition to these learning apps, there's information sitting in silos across a school's digital estate, from your student information system, learning management system, pastoral care system, et cetera, which all hold really critical data about a student. Increasingly now, what we're seeing is leaders across the education sector realizing that these point-in-time snapshots of students are really not enough to gain that holistic understanding of a student. So we're seeing this increased usage of data visualization tools like your Power BI for historical analytics. So we're seeing schools starting to import multiple point-in-time data sets from different data sources, your attendance data, your academic data, behavioral data, et cetera, and starting to visualize and developing a better understanding of trends and patterns in relation to their student body. Across the education sector as well, we're seeing predictive models being built out across a number of different use cases, mainly in the higher ed space and slowly coming into K-12 as well. Things like predicting student ATARs, predicting students at risk of developing mental health issues, predicting students at risk of self-harm, predicting students at risk of contract cheating, students at risk of academic failure, et cetera, the list goes on. Ultimately, what all of these predictive models or use cases are really seeking to uncover is those students at risk, right? And why is that? So that as an educational organisation, a targeted plan can be developed to improve the experiences and therefore the learning outcomes of each of those students. Which brings me to looking forward, where we really see educational organizations wanting to build this 360 view of a student and have a platform which is able to provide prescriptive information about how they can improve the learning experiences and outcomes, as well as the overall well-being of each student that they have. So the key point here from a technology perspective is that in order to develop that real-time or near real-time 360 view of a student and have those mechanisms in place for proactive intervention, you need to be able to integrate your data from across those various systems and apps. There are always going to be dozens, if not hundreds of data sources in any learning environment, and Azure could be the platform that you choose to unify your data in a secure and scalable way. So if I was to summarize the evolution of data and analytics in the education sector, we started off with historical analytics. So looking back in time, pulling those data sets from different source systems, trying to piece together parts of the puzzle and gain that understanding of an individual student and student body. More and more now we're seeing educational organizations reach for those visualization and predictive analytics tools to predict different kinds of students across their student body, across a number of different use cases, both academic and well-being, and then try and reactively intervene, put a place in plan to change the course of that student's life cycle. Looking forward, however, the true value of data and analytics, of having a data and analytics strategy or a platform at a school will be realized when technology is being used to aid teaching and learning staff and leadership staff, as well as parents and students to make those real-time proactive decisions and intervene before it's too late so that we can create better teaching and learning environments and promote student learning experiences, outcomes, and well-being. The use of AI will, of course, be an integral part of life in the coming future. And for learners, what this means is a really tailored experience, control over time, place, path, and pace of learning. And for our teachers, parents, and community, it means stronger insights into a whole student and also a lot of time saved trying to pull this information together so that they're able to focus on their job, which is to provide that quality and personalized care and teaching for their students. So I'm going to show you a few slides which really illustrate what 21st century learning can look like, not just the acquisition of knowledge, but really how technology can support the development of soft skills and socio-emotional learning, which we know to be paramount for learners to thrive in the age of AI. Please note, though, that these are only mock-ups. They're really just intended to illustrate personalized learning. They're not intended to be prescriptive at all, but really to illustrate and make concepts tangible. So in this view over here, we've got our teacher, John Perkins. So he's received an alert that one of his students, Sarah, requires his attention. So upon clicking into the Wellbeing tab, he immediately is able to get this complete picture of Sarah. So you can see here several red flags have popped up, right? She's been absent 4 days this month. She's had 5 behaviour referrals this week. She's withdrawn from the soccer team, and she's had 3 counsellor referrals. Information like Sarah pulling out from the soccer team is likely information only the soccer coach would even know about and potentially store in their own system. It could be weeks before other teachers or other staff across the school would find out about that kind of information. The visualization in the bottom left-hand corner also indicates that she's been spending a lot more time online later in the night than in previous terms. So this telemetry is being pulled directly from your Office 365 data lake. All this information about Sarah would not be possible to see in the single view if data from your student information system, your learning management system, pastoral care system, etc., were not integrated and talking to each other. You can also see notes in the bottom right-hand corner from Sarah's father, Bob, which has been pulled directly from the school's student information system, where John can see that Sarah's parents are going through a divorce. So again, really adding to that 360 view of his student. So when flicking over to the recommended interventions tab, John can see that one of the recommended interventions is to tweak her workload and potentially reduce some of those additional stresses that she has on her plate. So maybe what John chooses to do is share these recommendations with all of Sarah's teachers so that they can sort of all get on the same page. and then take those measures accordingly as well. And then he can choose to, if there are any updates made to her workload, choose to share those with Sarah's parent or parents as well. Another example, John has received a missed call from Kelvin, one of his students, Eamon's father. So we've got Alice here, an AI bot integrated into the system, which displays the email with a prompt to call Kelvin via Teams back. So with a click of just one button, Alice has docked a snapshot on the right-hand side of Eamon's profile, which is drawn directly from the Dynamics-based student information system, includes his performance, his attendance, his behavioural record. So this means that whilst on call with Eamon's father, John can quickly scan and click into any of these, which really enables this insightful conversation about not just the report card, but anything to do with Eamon, his real-time well-being, performance, areas of improvement, extracurricular, so on and so forth. So again, without this integration of data sources into a single view, John would likely be, whilst on call, jumping from view to view, system to system to try and pull all of these parts of the puzzle together to understand everything going on with Eamon. So ultimately, the opportunity for true transformation is when all of your systems are cloud-based, they're connected and working intelligently together, because this is when we can see the true value realized in the form of better experiences and outcomes for our students, parents, and our teaching and learning staff as well. In this new paradigm, teaching and learning staff, parents, and community will have a lot stronger insights into a whole student, which, like I said, not only enables a whole heap of time to be saved, but enables them to provide more quality and personalized coaching and be able to support the academic and wellbeing experiences and outcomes of all students like never before. And it's with the likes of our Microsoft partners like Antares, where we're able to help and continue helping educational organizations across the country really realize this vision of intelligent, connected schools, so that we can together with you empower every student across Australia to achieve more. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Faisal from Haileybury. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Muskan, and thank you, Sula, for having me. I see some very familiar faces here, so special shout out to Jane Hoffett, Jane, and Stephen Archibald. As you can see, we have been around for a while. We do have close to 5,000 students with 5 campuses across Australia, and 1 campus in Tianjin, which operates autonomously than us, but we do keep close ties with. So now the ICT department didn't get to 26 staff members overnight, if that was what you were thinking. We started out with 13 staff in 2019, and then through very difficult challenges during 2020 and 2021, at the start of and in the height of COVID, we grew to 26 strong. The department is broken down into various teams. We have our frontline support as per any IT department. In schools, we have our infrastructure team, application and DevOps teams, which we're lucky to have, I know. And we're about to hopefully get final approval on forming our security team. So that in itself was already a long journey, to say the least. I guess today we're going to talk more about the data, transforming data into success. So let's get started. I got to warn you that this is like the coolest picture you are going to be seeing in this presentation, as the topic of data is very dry. So please bear with me as we go through the slide deck. I promise it's not going to be long. I think there are only about 14 slides, so please do forgive me if it's a bit dry. But do ask questions if you have any along the way. So in late 2019, early 2020, we decided to have vision statements for the IT department. One of the vision statements specifically was done for our data in late 2020, I think. And this is what it is. It is about 2 years old, so not the latest iteration, but since we are still in the midst of our data journey, we still think it's valid. Pro tip, always start with a vision statement before embarking into something that is going to take a few years for you to deliver. So you can still come back to it and check yourself if you've gone off track or somewhat. Next slide, Slap. So in the beginning, we were not in a good state, I should say, back in 2019, at least to my standards. My role at the time was to create this strategy to fix all these, which, as we all know, is a lot harder than people outside our industry seem to think. I'm sure people in this webinar will relate to some of the items that I listed here. So it's pretty common in most schools, especially schools that do not have big IT departments or lack funding. I hope some of the things I will share later on will help give you some pointers or insights to start your own journey or adjust your direction if you're already in the thick of it. The one thing I made sure that my executives and my stakeholders know consistently is that this is going to be a long haul piece of work. We are talking 3 to 5 years, and due to our size specifically, and I will go into details in the next few slides as to why it is. So how do we start our journey? I always like to take stock of what we have at the moment. So we took it upon ourselves to have an internal audit first. We had workshops with individual teams in the department, and as a department, we asked hard questions about what data are we holding? Where is the data being kept? Is it secure? Who can access it? Those were just some of the questions we asked as part of our internal audit. We then spoke to external heads of departments, team leaders, external stakeholders, both in the business as well as in the academic space, and ask them about their data, obviously in layman terms. At the end of that, we started to be able to paint a picture, and that picture, as small as it was, began to look like a mural, and then that mural started to look more like graffiti. And it didn't get better after that, I can tell you that much. But we got to the end of it, and then and only then that we decided to engage vendors to audit us. Now, the good thing is we already had majority of the answers that they will be asking. What we used them for was predominantly to rate us based on industry best practice and frameworks to see where we stand amongst it all. So based on the result of the audit, we worked with them to build our roadmap to where we need to be and identify the quick wins that we could do right now as well. We decided in the end to break the roadmap into multiple work streams, which I'll share in a minute, and into multiple phases, which does make it a bit complicated, but internally it was a bit more manageable for us to undertake. As we are building the roadmap, there were obviously key areas that we took note. And one of them is data governance, which I cannot stress enough how important this is. As you will see when you go down your own data journey, you will be referring back to your framework time and time again. So this governance workstream that I pulled out of our roadmap took a long time to start. And the reason was because it involved multiple stakeholders outside of the department. And the maturity levels of within the IT department had to be at a certain level before we could even embark on getting a governance committee put together. This diagram is cyclical because it needed to be for our use cases that we identified. We have set up a committee with various stakeholders from our risk and compliance department to our teaching and learning staff as custodians of our data governance framework. We are in the midst of selecting vendors who will help us write up our final pieces of the framework document, as well as helping us operationalizing them. After which we will look at funding the various initiatives that come out of it, which could be for new tools or additional resources needed to maintain the framework to be put in place. And the final bit is the change management, where the culture changes will need to be addressed to ensure the framework is followed, and most importantly, to make our end users understand why it should be followed and hopefully appreciate the changes that we are putting across. Now, our data tells us so much about not only us as a school, but the community that surrounds us. These 3 points are only a few of the benefits we're getting insight on going down our data journey. Protecting our students, part of the data journey is to look at how we can better protect our students' data and inadvertently protecting our students at the same time. Knowing where your student data resides is important. Obviously, one of the discoveries of the audit that we did, we found that when we spoke to some of our external business and academic stakeholders, they had Excel sheets that were holding student data and useful student data at that. The data was kept in SharePoint, but should it though? That was the next question we asked. So knowing where your data sits is as important because you can only protect what you know. The next point below is one of our long-term goals with the data that is collected for our students. What does a successful student look like? And the same goes for our staff. What does a successful staff member look like? And not only academic staff, but the business side as well. Key metrics might be engagement levels in teams, number of meetings or lack thereof, how low their annual leave is at the moment, participation in surveys, in town halls, for example. It's becoming a bit scary about the data that we can collect from the various systems like our HR system, our teaching and learning system and LMS system and so on and so forth. But that's where some of the values are also gotten as well. So understanding the school holistically, imagine being able to understand the demographic of your parents that are coming to the school. Imagine being able to understand the demographic of your local area on income status, crime rates, etc. Then look at collating that data in your admissions data that you have collected and the marketing data that you are tracking. These can lead to critical business decisions that your executives can make strategically. As you can see, we have chosen Microsoft to be our main technology partner and using their technology stack for our data journey. We chose Microsoft to be our main technology partner is due to the platforms that are already pre-developed for us that we just have to consume and not build from scratch. Training is also straightforward and how widely spread their platforms are being used. So it's easy for us to get help when we need it. They are just these are just some of the services that we are currently consuming or are consuming in the future, which will be expanded further in the coming years. Now, I spoke earlier about the different work streams with different phases. Well, these are just some of the work streams that are currently ongoing. Antares is one of the key Microsoft partners that we have engaged for our data lake project. I would love to go deeper into the different work streams, but I'm bound with some certain level of confidentiality. But this is where some of the work streams that we have put together. So we started in 2020, and where are we at now? These are some of the key achievements that I can share with you. I guess the most significant part of the progress from what you see is the formation of the Data Governance Committee and the Cloud Transformation Project, which we have started. So have a read of that for a second, and we can go to the next slide. So what does the end game look for us? So what are we planning to be in the next 5 years? The final phase for us to use AI-driven analytics on our data for the betterment of the school, obviously. We are still a long ways before that will happen, but keeping to our vision, the decisions we make in the future must rely heavily on insight coming from the data that we can get access to. That being said, however, I don't think gut feel and instinct can be replaced overall, but I think it can be augmented by the correct use of data that is in front of you. And that's that.
Cool. Thank you, Faisal. Appreciate that. Thank you both, Faisal and Muskan, for your presentations. I found them very informative. Now we're moving towards the end, and I'd like to cover two notable pieces of IP we have available for schools before we open up for questions. The first piece of technology that I'd like to introduce you to is called Alex. It stands for Adaptive Learning Experience. It's a SaaS platform. It is a data-driven AI-based platform actually that amplifies teaching and learning experience by building learning communities with students and teachers. It leverages the power of data to help provide a personalized learning experience for students. Alex is currently being adopted by many schools, not only in Australia, but also in the US, China, and Singapore. It is built on Microsoft Teams and comprises of AI-based self-learning QBot and an analytics engine. The analytics engine we have provides insights into the patterns and trends and provides information on how students are engaging with the content, which students are engaged and not engaged. The analytics engine is built on research on how social communities effectively work together. So, for example, we know that students with high network tend to perform better than others, and students tend to group together with other students that tend to score similarly. We use these types of research to provide useful information for teachers and the heads of school. QBot is a digital learning assistant that builds an open and inclusive learning community by promoting questions and answers and knowledge sharing among students and teachers. It's built into every single team in Microsoft Teams and uses AI to answer previously asked questions. It learns from every question and gets smarter and smarter over time. And the third and the final component of Alex is the provisioning engine that automates and integrates information. It allows IT to manage and administer teams at scale and brings best practices for collaboration and to form effective communities. If you have any questions about Alex or would like a demo or like to have a deeper dive into it, please let me know. I'm more than happy to have a chat or actually show you the platform in more depth. But for today, I wouldn't be able to go in a lot of detail. The second piece of key IP I'd like to share with you is our modern data platform framework. We have invested in developing this framework for over 5 years, and it allows schools to accelerate the journey in building their data platform. Our framework helps customers in two big ways. Firstly, it comprises of all of the best practice technical setup and configurations you need to have when setting up your data platform. And secondly, it uses a metadata-based approach for ingesting data in your platform. What this means is that this approach allows the technical teams to focus on solving the actual business problem that we're trying to solve, as opposed to getting stuck in setting up and configuring the technical components and understanding all the nuts and bolts of the technical components that make up the entire solution. I'm proud to announce that we will be making our modern data platform framework open source shortly, and it will be available on GitHub for everybody to download. If in the meantime this is of interest, please do reach out to us and we'll be more than happy to make that available to you outside of the process that we're working on. Lastly, I have a few call to actions before we open up for questions. If you would like to discuss your data project or you have any data needs, please contact me directly or feel free to reach out to us through our website. If you're interested in knowing more about Alex or would like to learn more about it, please feel free to contact us as well. And lastly, be sure to access our modern data platform on GitHub when it will be available. And like I said before, if you'd like to have early access to it, feel free to get in touch with us. That is it for today, short and sharp. But what I'd like to do now is open up for questions. I'm sure you have many questions for Faisal, Muskan, and if you have any questions for me, feel free to ask them as well. Now, I think Faisal, there's a question. Are you still using synergetic as a single point of truth? It's a very specific question. Do you want to take that on?
At this point in time, yes, Stephen, but in the long term, what we're trying to do is to get away from that. So a lot of schools I know have multiple platforms that they use with, multiple platforms, multiple systems that are holding disparate information with regards to students and teachers and staff members. So what we're thinking in the future, without revealing how we're going to be doing so much, is to have a master database of all these data into one single platform. So there's no single point of truth application base, if that explains it to you.
Cool. Thanks, Faisal. There's a question from Kishore. Is QBot School independent or generic, public? So QBot is rolled out to every school, and if you're part of a bigger education institution, then there are configurations we have that can be made available so you can actually share data amongst the schools, but it is deployed per school. Viviana, you have a question. I'm concerned about private data access. How can we ensure we protect that data? I'm wondering, Muskan, if you want to add to that, and Faisal, I would keen to understand if you've taken any steps to protect the data as well.
I think the first thing I would say is that's sort of where your data governance management or strategy comes into play. It's not really just a document. It's about all those your processes, policies, roles, metrics, standards. It's the whole lot, which sort of allows for that effective and efficient use of your data. And then in doing that or setting up that strategy, that's when you get to establish those management processes that allow for your data to be secure, private, accurate, standard, all those different sort of things that you would want your data to be in order to have sort of high quality data that you're pulling in order to build a modern data platform. So I think it would be starting with figuring out, like Faisal said, what do you have in your environment? And then then figuring out the roles, policies, and processes around all that different kind of data would be the starting place for that. Faisal, did you want to add?
Yep. One of the key things that you need to actually also do is the classification of your data, because you need to understand what data is considered super, private versus what data you can actually share. But again, coming back to that data governance bit, once that framework is in place, you have to learn how to, or you have to go into the journey of actually operationalizing it. And that's the most difficult part. But if you look at the modern tools that are out there, if you look at just Office 365, for example, there's DLP settings, security settings in there that can actually help you protect that data immediately. So it really depends on how you classify your data as a business first, then work your way as to how you're going to be securing those more private data versus more publicly accessible data.
Cool. Another question, did you pull historic data in the new solution at Haileybury, or did you have a year zero?
All right, which one was high level data architecture, any demo and reports? I would love to share with you how that looks like, but I can't. Maybe I can share with you privately. So Sulab, if you want to share my email out to Kishore, I'll be happy to chat with her.
Sounds good. Faisal, I've got a question for you. What were some of the challenges you had when you laid down the strategy? How did you actually engage the senior management and the stakeholders in this entire journey?
The first step that I did to engage my executives was more about seeking to understand what their understanding is of data, and that would basically set the stage of how I'm going to be approaching them with the understanding of data in the first place. So if they don't understand the value of the data, if they don't understand the concept of business process and how it's tied to data, the architecture that we're going down with, then it's going to be a very hard discussion moving down the road. So the first point is to take stock as to what level of maturity your executives have about data governance, about securing data, data classification, and so on and so forth. That would be the first thing, and then start to educate them. And that's why our data governance committee took so long. It took a year before we could get that kind of maturity level within the IT department and externally as well from the IT department to be formed. So it's all about the maturity level as to how fast they can understand the concept that you're going to try to sell it to them.
And Faisal, what's been the feedback? You've been on this journey for about 2 years. What's been the feedback from the management on this journey?
They want us to move faster. That was the last feedback I got this morning, actually. They want us to start as quickly as possible, move as quickly as possible, but you just have to kind of curtail them back a bit and say, hey, hang on, we've got a framework, we've got a roadmap, so we've got to take these steps before we can move on as quick as they want. So they can't wait. So I guess the initial work that we did with them to make them understand and appreciate the data that we have and how it's being governed has sunk in, and now they're hungry for more. So there you go.
Cool. It's good. Jane has a question. What use cases or types of data did you start with?
The use cases was very, that's a good question, Jane. One of the use cases, I guess, that we brought across to them was how do you treat your student data, right? How do you get the best out of that data? So I think I mentioned in one of my slides, imagine, so paint them a picture, right? Imagine what you can do with a student data. Now we know exam results are there. We know NAPLAN results are there. We know that ACE results are there, but it doesn't paint the picture of your student holistically, right? Because they still have other interactions that they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So like Muskan was showing about the attendance, about the well-being side of the student. So how do you consolidate all these data sets and paint a picture of a student or a successful student? So that was the use case that I used, Jane, just to sell that idea. And from that actually triggered a lot of conversation. So instead of just what makes a successful student, it became what makes a successful teacher. Does the student play a part? Does the timetabling play a part? Does the extracurricular activities play a part in painting that picture of a successful student and a teacher? Then we went into the staff. So what does a successful staff look like? Can we measure their level of engagement? Can we measure their level of work? Those kind of things. So that's how the conversation started, and the buy-in after that was quite fast when you can tell that story.
Thanks, Faisal. Muskan, if I can put you on the spot, I'm wondering if you can share with us what you're finding, what you're finding with some of the schools in terms of the data journey they're taking. Where are they at, and what sort of assistance do they need to get started with?
I think everyone's at a very different place. All of our schools are very different places in their journey. Some are, just starting to look at data visualization tools and sort of still at that journey where they're looking backwards at historical data and analysing that data to inform decisions for the future. So sort of more reactive in their approach. Whereas we have other schools, like you've got your Haileybury, who are sort of starting to envision this future of proactive intervention, or before we even have a successful student, figure out what are the factors that contribute to that, and can we change that before they get there, or just sort of tailor their journey. So I would say, everyone's all over the place at the moment, but the schools that I think are very successful, no matter where they are in their journey, are those who are starting to think about things like a data governance plan, or starting to think about things like what's really important for a student versus a staff versus, what do we actually want to achieve through a modern data platform? I think the schools that come to us and say, we want this, if I show them some of the mock-up slides, we find that those are schools that are really struggling to kick off their journey because they themselves don't know what their objectives are. And like Faisal said, I think a big part of this is informing the wider audience, because ultimately, whilst the IT team is responsible for the implementation, there are so many other stakeholders at the school who have to be on board. So how do you inform them of what is data governance? What is, a modern data platform? What does it mean to bring all your data sources together? So starting to think about, well, where is all of your data, to sort of kickstart that journey.
Thank you, Muskan. One of the questions we get often is, how do we're keen to leverage the data we have. We haven't been able to do much with data yet. And, how do we take the first step? How do we get started with the data project? We have an approach, like a 6-step approach to it, and that doesn't mean it's a it's a long approach, or you have to spend weeks and months, etc., to get to that point. But our approach also is very similar to what Faisal mentioned before. It's really simplistically and fundamentally understanding what you're looking to achieve, understanding what your gaps are, understanding what your capabilities are, and creating, what we like to do is we like to create an action list or a list of things that you want to achieve within the next whatever horizon period that you're aspiring towards. And then we break down into specific initiatives or work packages. And those work packages can then be taken to the management, and you can have a specific conversation about, well, what are we going to get out of this, and what is going to be the return on investment, and those kind of things, etc. as well. If there is anybody on the call who would like to have a further chat and deep dive into how do you take the first step with data, feel free to contact us, and we'll be more than happy to have a more detailed chat about it as well. Just having a look at the Q&A. Are there any questions that anybody is burning to ask?
I think the other thing that I just mentioned while we're waiting for more questions is it's really important to think about why this modern data platform is important to every single stakeholder. And that includes our parents, because like I said, if we look historically, we haven't really had that real-time or near real-time view of how our children are performing at school, or how they are from a well-being standpoint. And I genuinely think that this opportunity will become a differentiator in the future for where parents choose to send their children to school, because if they're going to get more information or insight from one school about their child every day as compared to another, I think that will sort of be a big differentiator in the future.
Got a question from Tim, and sorry I missed Holly's question before. Faisal, this is aimed to you. How have you streamlined what and how parents and students interface to some or all of the student data, mobile apps, portals, etc.?
We have used a combination of both, Tim. So there are some limitations on our LMS in terms of how it's presenting the data. So we had to curate that data and bring it across to a more, I guess, pleasant viewing, UX, UI wise, for it to be consumed by our parents. So sometimes the raw data itself coming from the source of data, which is the LMS or Synergetic or what have you, sometimes it's not as easily understood. So that's why we had to use combinations of both the portals and the mobile apps for us to present that kind of data.
Thank you, Faisal. I'm just wondering how many of you on the call here have started with your data journey? Would you like to share in the chat where you're at in terms of what you think needs to be achieved? That would be good for, I think, the audience to get a sense of as well. Any final thoughts from you, Faisal?
Nope. Well, final words, I guess, is that it's not going to be a quick process. I know how the experience that we went through ourselves was quite painful, and COVID didn't help, obviously, with us being disconnected the way we were. But now that we're all back on campus, it makes the progress of our data journey a lot quicker. So be prepared for long conversations with your executives. Be patient. That's the key, because at first glance, they will not understand unless you can sell it from a business point of view. They're not going to understand what you're going to be trying to do. So it took a while for us to get traction on it. It took over almost a year to get traction on this. So just be patient. It'll come.
That's a very valid point, Faisal. I mean, when we think about data projects are, there's a perception that data projects are long and require a lot of investment. But the reality is you can actually break that down into bite-sized components, and you can do that as per your budget planning and based on what actually is actually feasible for you. So you don't have to actually tackle it as one big project. You can definitely break it down into sizable chunks.
Yep. Have multiple work streams, basically.
Cool. I think we're doing well on time. Muskan, did you want to add anything? Otherwise, I think we'll look to close.
I think the only thing I would say is don't feel the need or don't feel like you have to build anything from scratch. if you're thinking of a unique use case for a data and analytics platform or dashboard, it's likely already been done before. So reach out to our partners like Antares and find out what's been done. Just explore what's already been done, and it will sort of spark ideas for you around, you know, what's really possible, and take it from there.
Cool. Thank you so much to everybody for coming to the session today. I hope you found it useful. Massive thanks to Faisal and Muskan for taking out the time to present today and for sharing your experiences and views. Really, really appreciate that. Before we finish, I'd just like a minute, not even maybe a minute of your time to answer a couple of quick questions for us that will be coming up on your screen very shortly. The purpose of these polls is to get very quick feedback on today's session, as well as some of the things that might be of interest to you. So I'll give you all about a minute to answer these questions. You will have a poll coming up on your screen very shortly. Once you're done, feel free to log off. We really appreciate you taking the time today, and thank you so much for everybody for coming along and participating. Cool, that is it. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for, again, making the time today, and bye, and have a good day. Cheers.
Battery low.